Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And this week does not disappoint because it was Thanksgiving here in the United States, and the media is focused on the presidential election and COVID, and now Thanksgiving. Basically, we have a whole bunch of data breaches that have come out this week that nobody is paying attention to, so you might be hearing these for the very first time right here. Now, before we dive in, I have to give a huge shout out to all the people that sent me information, linked me, tagged me, whatever it was to get me this information. It is always, always appreciated. And that is Chris Fallon, Jason Dance, David Walker, and Barrett Peterson. Guys, thank you so very much. And if you have a breach for me, please let me know. And I'm more than happy to give you a shout out here on Breaches of the Week, as well as on the air on my nationally syndicated radio show. Now with that, let's start, because we've got a lot of ground to cover here, and this is going to go all over the map. But we are starting with US Fertility. This is one of the largest networks of fertility clinics here in the United States. In a statement, they said that attackers, and I quote, acquired a limited number of files during basically the month that they were in the systems, and that the ransomware was eventually triggered on September 14th. So from about mid-August or so to September 14th, they were in and taking things. US Fertility said that some personal information like names, addresses, and other things were taken in the attack. Some patients also had their social security numbers taken, but the company warned that the attack may have also involved protected health information. Obviously, this is a HIPAA violation. We'll see where that goes. But if you have anything to do with US Fertility, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about Bumble. We're talking about the dating app here because researchers discovered that even if they've been banned from Bumble, they could acquire a whole bunch of information on daters using that app. Prior to the flaws being fixed earlier this month, those were open for about 200 days or so since the researchers alerted Bumble, and they could acquire identities of every Bumble user. If an account was connected to Facebook, for example, it was possible to retrieve all of their interests or pages they have liked. An attacker could also acquire information on the exact kind of person a Bumble user is looking for and all of the pictures that they had uploaded to the app. Perhaps most worryingly, though, is that if a person was in the same city as the attacker, it would be possible to get the user's rough location by looking at their distance in miles. An attacker could then spoof locations of a handful of accounts and then essentially use math to triangulate the target's coordinates. That is obviously a very serious issue. Bumble looks like they're fixing this right now, but heads up if you're on that dating app. Moving on, if you've got an Xbox and use Xbox Live, heads up here, because a serious flaw in Xbox Live allowed attackers to easily find out the email addresses used to register an Xbox gamer tag. Last week, an anonymous hacker reached out to Motherboard by Vice, claiming to be able to discover the email behind anybody's Xbox gamer tag. And by default, email addresses linked to gamer tags are private, and so Motherboard was able to actually verify the existence of this vulnerability by providing the hacker with 2 gamer tags, including one that was created just a few minutes earlier for testing purposes, and the hacker was able to send back the email addresses used to register those 2 accounts within seconds of the request from Vice. A second anonymous hacker said that the bug was in the Xbox Live enforcement portal, where gamers can contact the company's team that basically polices the Xbox Online community. Microsoft has apparently patched this issue, but heads up, if you use Xbox Live, you could have been exposed. Moving on, let's talk about the security firm. They make firewalls and antivirus, Sophos. They are warning that some of their customers may have had their data exposed due to a misconfigured internal system, according to a published report. On Tuesday, they sent a message to customers notifying them because of, and I quote, an access permission issue in a tool used to store information on customers who have contacted Sophos support. Some of the data may have been leaked, according to a report by ZDNet, which obtained a copy of the notification, and the possibly leaked information includes last names, email addresses, and phone numbers of customers. So heads up to you if you have used Sophos products. Moving on, Let's talk about Spotify, because attackers have been attempting to gain access to Spotify accounts using a database of 380 million records with login credentials and personal information collected from various sources. Now, for years, users have complained that their Spotify accounts were hacked after passwords were changed, new playlists would appear in their profiles, or their family accounts had strangers added to them from different countries. A new report detailing how a database containing over 380 million records, including login credentials, is actively used to hack Spotify accounts may shed some light on essentially these account breaches. Basically, this isn't Spotify security controls. This is people recycling their passwords over and over and over. And even if you're changing your password, maybe to something else you use commonly, you're still getting hit. Make sure your passwords are unique. Make sure you're enabling multi-factor authentication. Please, moving on. Let's talk about Delaware County, Pennsylvania. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has now joined a criminal investigation into who hacked the Delaware County, Pennsylvania government computer systems. Now, officials won't say what's been affected, other than this breach does not involve any emergency services or the Bureau of Election Computer Networks. That was obviously concerned going through an election where Pennsylvania was very much a swing state in contention. This past Monday, Delaware County officials released a statement on the breach saying, and I quote, "The County of Delaware recently discovered a disruption to portions of our computer network. We commenced an immediate investigation that included taking certain systems offline and working with computer forensic specialists to determine the nature and scope of the event. We are working diligently to restore the functionality of our systems. Hopefully they'll get back online soon, but if you have anything to do with Delaware County, Pennsylvania, or you live there, heads up to you." Moving on, let's talk about a company called Banijay. Now, this is a company behind the global television hits, including things like MasterChef and Big Brother. Their IT systems were compromised after a bad actor hit them demanding ransom and potentially exposing the personal information of hundreds, if not thousands, of their staff. Now, their staff has been told that this could include bank account information and ID records, such as passport data, though this is yet to be confirmed. The breach could also impact former employees who have yet to be notified by this as well. Now, the reporting source here, Deadline, heard that the hack basically downed the internal systems with the distribution arm of their company, Banijay Rights, was particularly affected and hit by this. So maybe some of their upcoming TV shows were hit and could be dumped. So if you want to know who wins your favorite TV show, maybe that happened here. Now, their CEO has been in regular communication with their team about the incident, and that's as far as we have in terms of that. But that could obviously be a huge problem, especially if the ransomware people are ransoming, let's say, the upcoming, twist ending to whatever show people are watching. So we'll see where that goes. Moving on, let's talk about BYJU. They own a online coding platform called White Hat Junior. They had AWS servers and S3 buckets left open, which allowed access into folders containing documents, file, data, and video. I don't have much more information about them right now, but heads up, if you use White Hat Junior or your kids do, they are potentially exposed. Moving on, let's talk about Ritzau. They are the largest independent news agency in Denmark, and they said in a statement they will not pay the ransom demanded by the ransomware gang that hit them this past Tuesday morning. Now, the Danish news agency has 10 million radio listeners, 8 million TV viewers, 3 million newspaper readers, and 15 million readers globally via their digital news sources. And so they are the largest provider in Denmark of this. And to quote them, "The hackers attacked Ritzau early Tuesday morning, and the news agency has thus been hit for more than a day. The attack has meant that the editorial systems have been shut down." So hopefully Ritzau will get back on their shoes, but if you have anything to do with them or are a subscriber, heads up to you. You may not be able to access things at the moment. Moving on, let me give you an update on IT giant Sopra Steria. If you recall, they had a massive data breach. They are a French IT giant globally. They said the other day in an official statement that their October Ryuk ransomware attack will lead to losses of between 40 to 50 million euros. Now, obviously, they should have known it's much cheaper to simply secure their systems better than have to go through a data breach remediation, but lesson learned apparently, 50 million euros is nothing to scoff at. Moving on, let's talk about Baltimore County schools. All Baltimore County schools were closed this past Wednesday after the school system was hit with a ransomware attack. And again, this is according to officials. The district has said their entire system is now inaccessible after an unknown actor basically took it over and is demanding ransom. Officials have not yet said how much money they want. This is an evolving situation, but hopefully Baltimore County Schools is back online at this point. It's never fun when we see school districts hit. Moving on, let's talk about the massive Chinese company online Baidu. Security researchers have discovered that two massively popular apps made by the internet giant out of China, Baidu, has been leaking user details. Now, the data breach affects the two Baidu apps, Baidu Search Box and Baidu Maps, which collectively have been downloaded more than 6 million times just in the United States. And so according to researchers from Unit 42, which is the global threat intelligence team at Palo Alto Networks, a Baidu software development kit was found to be sending private and sensitive data to a Chinese server. This included the user's phone model, the IMSI number, the MAC address, and more information. So if you are downloading or have these apps on your phone, understand that your personal information is being sent to servers in China, and you may not necessarily want that, as the Chinese government is loving to collect as much data as they possibly can, including on American citizens. Moving on, let's talk about COVID-19 patients in the country of Brazil, because the personal health information of more than 16 million Brazilian COVID-19 patients has been leaked online after a hospital employee uploaded a spreadsheet with usernames, passwords, and access keys to sensitive government systems on GitHub this month. This doesn't seem like this is a mistake. Most people that are using GitHub know what they're doing when they're moving data there, whatever that data is. Now, among the systems that had credentials exposed were the ESUSVE and SIVEP GRIPE. These are two government databases, two Brazilian government databases, I should say, that are used to store COVID-19 patients. Now, the first one, the ESUSVE, was used for recording COVID-19 patients with mild symptoms, while the other one, I'm just going to call it GRIPE, was used to keep track of hospitalized cases. The two databases contain sensitive details such as patient names, addresses, ID information, but also healthcare records such as medical history and medication regimes. That's obviously a very serious problem. So heads up, if you're in Brazil and you've had COVID-19 and the government knows about it. Moving on, let's talk about French food retail giant Carrefour. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. They have basically been fined 3 million euros for multiple data protection filings. Their data protection agency in France, the CNIL, has fined two companies of the Carrefour group for breaches of GDPR violations in several areas, including the obligation to inform individuals, the use of cookies, limiting the retention of data, the obligation to facilitate the exercise of rights, and failure to respect those rights of European Union citizens. The retail company Carrefour France was fined 2.25 million euros, and their banking subsidiary Carrefour Bank or Bank received an 800,000 euro penalty. And these were following complaints that the CNIL carried out checks on the company between May and July of 2019. And this really underscores the need that if you have a law like GDPR that you fall under, it is much cheaper to actually execute and sustain that law than it would be to accept a fine like this. Way cheaper to just adhere to it. Moving on, let's come back to the United States and talk about networking equipment vendor Belden. They make things like data cables and I think patch panels and stuff like that. They say a security breach took place after attackers gained access to a limited number of their file servers. Now, the intrusion was detected after the company's IT personnel detected unusual activity involving compromised servers. A subsequent investigation revealed that the intruders had copied data of some of their current and former employees, as well as limited company information regarding some of their business partners. So if you've worked for Belden or are a business partner of theirs, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about the industrial IoT chip maker Advantech. The Conti ransomware gang just hit them, and essentially they are now demanding $14 million in ransom to decrypt the infected systems and to stop leaking stolen company data. So hopefully Advantech will get back on their feet and secure their intellectual property. Otherwise, they may have to pay $14 million. Not fun. Moving on, let's talk about the truck routing provider Rand McNally, based out of Chicago in the United States. And I remember them from their maps, like the Rand McNally maps that, you used to buy and stuff like that back in the day before everybody had GPS on their phones and in their cars. They basically are working to restore network functionality following a cyber attack that hit their systems earlier this week. In a separate notification sent to customers this past Tuesday, Rand McNally said that there is no indication of customer data being affected by the cyber attack. Now, Rand McNally was not able to provide a recovery timeline or an estimation on how long it will take to restore their functionality. And also, starting this past Tuesday morning, the company's main website and fleet site went down, and basically they ended up coming back up with limited functionality the next day. So hopefully Rand McNally, based here in Chicago, will get on their feet. Moving on, let's talk about Fortinet. This is the firewall maker, as well as other security research and other things. An attacker has posted a list of one-time exploits to steal VPN credentials from almost 50,000 Fortinet VPN devices that are live across the globe, defending corporate and government networks right now. Now, present on the list of this vulnerable target are basically domains belonging to high street banks and government organizations from around the world. Now, this was actually patched a while back, which underscores the need to go ahead and make sure that your Fortinet firewalls, as any firewall, I don't care what the maker is continuously being updated, because these exploits are being found continuously. I actually happen to be involved in one where the Fortinet was not updated, and ta-da, ransomware attack. So this is obviously a very serious issue. Please make sure you're updating your Fortinet firewalls ASAP. Moving on, let's talk about a Sydney, Australia-based hedge fund called Levitas Capital. They had $75 million Australian under management, and apparently they collapsed. They went out of business after a cyber attack triggered by a fake Zoom invitation saw its trustee and administrator mistakenly approve $8.7 million Aussie in fraudulent invoices. That was enough to put them out of business. This is why we have good cybersecurity. It can literally put you out of business, even if you have 75 million in assets. That is crazy. Moving on, let's talk about Home Depot. This is obviously the home store place all over the United States, I'm assuming all over the world. They had a breach in 2014, and this is an update because they've now reached a settlement in 46 U.S. states. Home Depot agrees that they're going to pay $17.5 million U.S. to resolve this investigation into their 2014 data breach that affected roughly 40 million consumers. So you may be entitled to compensation if you shopped at Home Depot with your credit card between April 10th of 2014 through September 13th of the same year. Heads up to you. I may actually be entitled to that. I've been a Home Depot ever since I've lived wherever I've lived here in the United States. Moving on, let's talk about the CBS-owned Last.fm. They basically fixed a credential leak issue that revealed admin usernames and passwords. The leak occurred during a misconfigured PHP Symfony app running in debug mode that basically exposed profiler logs that had this information. With these credentials, an attacker could have accessed and modified Last.fm user account details. And so here we are. They have fixed this issue so far, but heads up if you use Last.fm, owned by CBS. Moving on, let's head on over to the United Kingdom and talk about flooring firm Headland Group. They announced they suffered a security incident when an unauthorized user gained access into their computer systems. And to quote them, certain back office systems were affected, including the email system, which has now been restored. The system containing customer and supplier information was not accessed, according to them, and the breach, and I quote, has had minimal impact on operations, according to them. So heads up if you use the Headland Group for flooring out of the United Kingdom. Moving on, let's talk about an events application called Peatix, P-E-A-T-I-X. They disclosed a data breach this week after user account information reportedly began circulating on Instagram and Telegram. In a breach notification to affected users, Peatix said that it learned on November 9th that user account data had been improperly accessed. Upon further investigation, the company found that usernames, email addresses, salted and hashed passwords, nicknames, preferred languages, their countries, and time zones had been compromised and exposed. So heads up if you use PTEX for your event applications or event coordination. Moving on, we have two finalies for this week. The first one we're going to be talking about is turkey bombing, because this seems really fitting now that the United States just went through their Thanksgiving. Millions of friends and family obviously were forced to spend Thanksgiving basically being socially distanced, going through and using things like Zoom and other platforms, but they're being targeted by cyber criminals as they turn to video platforms like Zoom. In this ongoing attack, security experts are warning victims were targeted with Zoom-related and Thanksgiving related or Thanksgiving specific lures that were reminiscent of Zoom bombing, and so they're calling it turkey bombing because it's focusing on the lure of Thanksgiving. This past Thursday, which was Thanksgiving, a security researcher warned that a major phishing campaign kicked off over the Thanksgiving long weekend and is aimed at stealing Microsoft credentials. Attackers have already successfully gotten credentials of thousands of users, according to the researcher that was looking into this. According to the researcher as well, quoted in a Bleeping Computer report, the attack is ongoing and is expected to continue as we come up into Christmas and Hanukkah and other holiday seasons here in the United States. We can just basically see this ride as they keep shifting these lures, because it's going to be a very socially distant holiday season as well. Now, the Thanksgiving Day themed email ploy leverages basically the popularity of Zoom video communication platforms. Bogus messages are being sent en masse to falsely tell recipients that you have received a video conference invitation, and obviously they're sending you to phishing sites where you're getting hit. So heads up to you, you may have not gotten that invitation to Thanksgiving that you thought you did, and given the political divide in the United States right now, I'm not surprised some of you didn't. Moving on, and let's go to our finally, we need to talk about President Trump. Specifically, President Trump's Twitter account. Now, according to reports, President Trump's Twitter account was allegedly hacked, but there is some skepticism if this is real or not, and I will let you guys decide this. But here's what's going on. Dutch police have questioned a security researcher who said that he successfully logged into the president's Twitter account by guessing the president's password. Last month, well-known cyber investigator Victor Gevers, I'm going to go with Gevers, said that he gained access to Donald Trump's Twitter account with the password, all caps, MAGA, M-A-G-A, 2020, exclamation point, MAGA 2020, exclamation point. Now, the White House has denied that this happened, and Twitter said that it has no evidence of this attack, but Mr. Gevers has now revealed more information to back up his claims. As part of his police interrogation, Mr. Gevers revealed for the first time that he had substantially more evidence of the hack, quote unquote, that he had previously released. He did not reveal exactly what information he had, but by logging into somebody's Twitter account, somebody in theory would be able to obviously see and send private messages for that person, in this case the President of the United States, see tweets that the user had privately bookmarked, meaning did President Trump bookmark tweets that he wanted to, let's say, review later or retweet at some point, those kinds of things, and also access information such as how many people the account holder had blocked, meaning is the president actually blocking people from seeing his account? I believe that is actually illegal under U.S. law for a president or government official to do, because what they are saying is public record, and the public is the public, no matter how mean they are on Twitter, which I believe is where civility goes to die. So here we are. They would have even been able to download and archive all of the user's data, including photos and messages, as well as private messages like DMs. Mr. Gevers said he was doing a semi-regular sweep of the Twitter accounts of high-profile U.S. election candidates on October 16th when he guessed President Trump's password. Now, he did not post any tweets or change any settings, but he said he took screenshots of some of the parts of the president's account. He said he had spent days trying to contact the Trump campaign to warn them about their security or lack thereof, and basically noted that they were lacking safeguards like two-factor authentication, which obviously is a huge thing, which would have thwarted this simple password guess, assuming it's true. and he tried to contact them continuously before going to the press. Now, obviously, two-factor authentication is widely used for security as well as other identity management, so it would behoove us to make sure the President of the United States, as anybody on Twitter, should actually have that essentially on their account and enabled, and not just Twitter, every account. Now, the US President's account is now considered secure, and at the time, Twitter said, and I quote, "We've seen no evidence to corroborate this claim. We proactively implemented account security measures for a designated group of high-profile election-related Twitter accounts in the United States, including federal branches of government." Twitter refused to answer any further questions about this potential hack, including whether or not the extra security measures were permanently enforced, or if the company even has access to the president's account activity. Mr. Gever's story has been met with skepticism by some in the information security world, as his screenshots could have been faked, which is a point that I have made in the past on these kinds of things. However, his claims, he does claim to have more data. He hopes he will not have to disclose this to prosecutors, but he says he's prepared to if necessary. And he said, and I quote, "I have evidence that was not included in the responsible disclosure to the Trump team because it did not add anything in alerting the victim of the risk." And so that is your final hack of the day, if you will. Was the president's account hacked because his password was MAGA 2020 exclamation point? Could very well be. We know, and I'm not trying to pick on the older generations, but a lot of older generations that are not tech savvy or understand these risks do have passwords they use or do not very regularly that are very easy to remember, or they do not do things like enable multi-factor authentication. And so by virtue of that, I could see that as very plausible. Now, as a researcher myself, I want hard and concrete evidence. Data can be faked. Transaction logs can potentially be faked, but if there are unique IDs, they're much harder to fake because they can be matched by the originating source, in this case, Twitter. It's in Twitter's best interest also not to disclose that the President of the United States has been hacked by something that simple. That obviously is a national security risk for the United States as well. And so by virtue of that, I think if Mr. Gevers is correct, he needs to show up in some kind of court of law, in this case, I believe in the Netherlands, and actually present the evidence so that it can be verified and Twitter can corroborate formally, in the government. Now, maybe this happens after President Trump leaves office, when President-elect Biden is sworn in late January, for government national security and all of that. But I think it's something that, we really need to look at. So you tell me, was the president's account hacked? We'll see. And those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? Probably. We're just going to go with probably at this point. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.